What's up? How you doing? It's been a while. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Scorching hot day here in Osaka, and today a bit of a special one for you. I've been kindly asked by the fine folk at Negative Insight fanzine / web scene out of the States, run by four fine fellows: Eric, Max, probably not Max Ward, Aaron, might be Aaron Comet Bus, not sure, and Nelson. So thanks for asking me to do this. I've probably been asked because sort of Martin Popoff wasn't available or something like that, but I'm happy to do it. I'm just going to talk about Hawkwind. That's what this is all about, and show some records. Got a few stories I'll throw in, and this video is going to tie in with an interview that Negative Insight have done with Frenchy Gloder from the amazing Flicknife records from England. And Frenchy was a good mate of Lemmy, and I think Nick Turner as well. So the interview with him and this video sort of tie in together, and I guess I'll put a link to the interview down below, so have a look at that. So shall we get started? Let's go into it. Don't want to waffle on too much. So my journey with Hawkwind probably goes back to about 1979, 1980. Southwest England, horrible boarding school, not much freedom. Had a good mate called Stephen Knight. He'll pop up again later, but he and I loved heavy metal. We're on a sort of metal journey. Already started. We're into Motörhead, AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Pink Floyd, not, you know, all the stuff. And one day, I can't remember, there was a copy of Silver Machine 45 in the sort of common room where we used to gather and listen to records, and we played that and we loved it. But we loved it, you might be surprised, we loved it. We didn't really sort of understand psychedelia or space rock or anything at that time, so we loved it because this is a single, by the way. Sorry, this is a German picture sleeve, and then of course I'm living in Japan, so of course I had to get nice Japanese picture sleeve there, but the version we had was just a non-picture sleeve version. But anyway, we liked it because it reminded us of two bands we sort of already liked. One of those bands was the Mighty Quo, love Status Quo, and another one of the bands they reminded of us was Vardis, great raw new wave of British heavy metal band. And we loved Silver Machine because it had that same sort of 12-bar boogie riff through it, which reminded us of Vardis and Status Quo. And it's funny because a few years later Vardis actually did a cover version of sort of Silver Machine, so my instincts about that boogie riff were correct, weren't they? Because obviously Steve Vardis was a big fan of that song too, so they covered it. But yeah, that was sort of the beginning of my sort of journey with Hawkwind. But it wasn't, I sort of hopped on the spaceship a little bit throughout the years with Hawkwind, and I'll get to that in a bit. But I think next up, what happened was one of us, either me or Steve, picked up this record, Masters of the Universe, and at the time we didn't know that it was a sort of compilation album. We just thought it was a sort of regular Hawkwind record. It's got sort of great artwork on that, so we just assumed it was a regular Hawkwind record. But it's sort of got Masters of the Universe and the Brainstorm. Actually, looking at it now, it actually says on the back where each of the songs have come from, but I don't think we even sort of paid attention to that kind of thing back then, and there was no internet and everything, obviously. But so this was our sort of ticket in, really, to Hawkwind. We played this record to death and loved it, but some of it was a bit too strange for us, to be honest. We sort of loved the more simple stuff, like Silver Machine at the time, and it took a couple of more years for us to sort of fully understand what was going on. So maybe fast forward a couple of years, finished school, my mate Steve moved back up north, back to his hometown, and I moved back to my hometown in the southwest of England. And after that, I was sort of I'd been into metal, and I'd sort of discovered hardcore punk through another friend called Steve. So that time it was all about sort of Discharge and GBH and everything, and this, that and the other, but I'll get to that again later. But So what happened was, because of the punk thing and getting into crass and all that, I used to hang around at this punk squat in a small seaside town called Bournemouth, and I saw some sort of good gigs there. Some good bands played in that squat: Dirt, Self Abuse, The Mad Are Sane, and I suppose the most interesting one for readers of Negative Insight might be the band Eat Shit. Sort of become sort of some legendary band. I saw them, that was wild. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because it all ties in. One of the Hawkwind records that I'm going to get to later, they used to be played at that squat like all the time, so I really sort of grew to love that record, but I'll get to that later. So what I'm going to do is I've chosen sort of 4 phases of Hawkwind: early 70s, sort of later 70s, early 80s, late 80s, and just picked out 2 from each era, and let's just have a sort of little look at those, shall we? So what I've done first is chosen X, In Search of Space, 1971. Great record. Starts off with You Shouldn't Do That 15-minute jam, just the same sort of repetitive riff all the way through. Very sort of kraut rockish vibes on that one, and a lot of people sort of say, I've heard people say that if you can't handle that song, then Hawkwind isn't for you. I don't agree with that necessarily, but I love that song, 15-minute jam. And then on the B-side, Master of the Universe, we took the wrong step years ago. I love that. It's one of those sort of acoustic-y, psychedelic songs that Hawkwind sort of used to throw in on most of their sort of 70s records. I love that. So this one will be my first choice for the early 70s. Some people might choose do re mi fa sol la ti do after this one, but I'm gonna go with this one. And one more, which is this the last record that Lemmy played on? I don't know, I don't remember. I should have googled this stuff, but it doesn't really matter. It's not a sort of fact-finding mission, but of course Lemmy plays bass and also rhythm and lead guitar, and sings on Lost Johnny, which of course Motörhead did later. Another thing I like about this record, it's got Simon House is on this record. Simon House plays violin and mellotron, and Simon House used to be in this band in the late 60s and early 70s called High Tide, and their first record is brutal. It's really heavy, distorted, sort of psychedelic, heavy rock prog. It's called Sea Shanties, and so if you're a Hawkwind fan, then you sort of or a heavy rock fan in general, and you haven't heard High Tide Sea Shanties, be sure to check that out. It'll sort of knock your socks off. But this is one of my favourites from the sort of first period of Hawkwind. Hall of the Mountain Grill, Window Chain, Psychedelic Warlords is the kickoff track. Great record, great artwork as well. Love this record, lovely stuff. So that's they did 4 records in the first half of the 70s. So I don't want to go through every record. So that's the 2 I've chosen from the first part of the 70s. Now, getting back to me story of sort of hanging about in that squat I just mentioned, and then around that time, a bunch of us from that squat went and saw Hawkwind at this Stonehenge free festival. Now, I've been checking this out, and I'm not sure exactly which year I saw Hawkwind, because they did play in 83 and 84, but after a bit of research, I'm pretty sure that I saw them in 1984. One of the friends that ended up was sort of hanging around the squat, a girl called Alice. She was actually a dancer with Hawkwind in 1984, and you can see clips of it, or I think the whole thing even. There's a DVD of it. You can see it on YouTube if you want to see Hawkwind. They were amazing. They were strange days for a sort of 17-year-old kid. Stonehenge Free Festival. I think I saw Omega Tribe. Might have even seen. I forget. It's a really sort of distant memory. I remember like little bits of Hawkwind. I think they might have played really early in the morning. I think I remember it being a really sort of Nick Turner heavy set. Am I right in saying that? If you saw Hawkwind in 83 or 84, let me know. Fill me in, because I'd like to sort of fill in the gaps with that. It's been bugging me a little bit. I've been trying to remember, but I thought I'd mention that first because it's sort of quite interesting. And second, it ties in with the Flicknife Records thing, because Flicknife put out this double LP, Hawkwind, this is Hawkwind, Stonehenge, Do Not Panic. Double LP live, but only a bit of it is actually recorded at Stonehenge. The rest of it was recorded earlier on the Levitation tour, I think, in 1980. It's a good live album. I actually prefer the non-Stonehenge part of this record because it's got some of my favourites like Death Trap and Shot Down in the Night and Angels of Death, sort of, and Side Power and Levitation, sort of more anthemic, shorter sort of Hawkwind songs from that 80s era that I'm a big fan of. So, but anyway, I thought I'd show this because it ties in with the Flicknife theme of this episode. So there you go, Flicknife Records. This is Hawkwind, Stonehenge, Do Not Panic. Okay, let's move on to the next half of the 70s. So I'm going to go to 1975. For my money, this is sort of best, or at least my favourite Hawkwind record out of the entire discography. It's a masterpiece. It's what you call a flawless platter. It's perfect from start to finish. The problem I had with this record at first was the A-side is so good that I would often like just put the needle back to the beginning and not flip it over, which is a mistake because on side B you've got the amazing Magnu, which is one of the best Hawkwind songs of all time. But that beginning sort of 1-2 punch of Assault and Battery into the Golden Void is one of the sort of best opening 1-2 punches of like any record. If you're gonna sort of check out only one Hawkwind record, I would say this will be the one to investigate. Of course, Lemmy is on this one too. Michael Moorcock appears on a couple of tracks as well. We'll get to him later. But yeah, and Simon House again is also on this record. But classic Desert Island Disc for me, definitely a top 20 record, any genre of all time. It's a masterpiece. Get into it now. From this sort of later 70s period, a lot of people might have chosen PXR5, but I've gone with this one instead. Quark, strangeness and charm. And I've chosen it because going back to my mate Steve Knight from school, we ended up living together in the north of England, horrible little town called Carlisle. Lived in a really rough area of the town. When I got there, I'd gotten deep into Discharge and GBH. There used to be a record shop called Pink Panther Records in Carlisle, and there was a little club. I forgot the name of the club. I saw the Verucas there, and who else? Political Asylum I saw there. But anyway, by the time I sort of moved up there, that was what I was into: Verucas, Discharge, GBH, Motörhead, and Crass. And Steve had gone full on hippie, and he'd got a bunch of Hawkwind records that I hadn't heard yet. And he to be honest, at that point, I sort of was not into me Hawkwind at that in that year. When you're young, a year or 6 months is a long time. So he was in his Hawkwind phase and doing sort of different things to me. I'll leave it at that. But he used to play a couple of records. The first album, he used to play it to death, and he used to annoy me. He used to drive me mad. But this one I liked a lot better because it's more sort of new wavy, more punky, sort of shorter songs. And I love songs like Damnation Alley. I love those sort of mid-paced, I call them sort of anthems, mid-paced, like catchy choruses, almost a little bit poppy, a little bit new wavy, shorter songs. I love those kind of Hawkwind songs from the late 70s, early 80s. And Damnation Alley is one of the best ones in that ilk, and so is the title track of this record. So I've got fond memories of this record. I'm a big fan of this record, so check it out. 1977. I wonder what people thought of this record in England in 1977. Sort of punk rock in full swing. I wonder what people thought of this at the time. It's kind of new wavy, even a bit of new wave British heavy metal. Love it. Great record. All right, let's move on to the 80s. And in the mid 80s, that's sort of the later part of this series, but I was living in a town called Bath. I'd moved from Bournemouth, was living in Bath, and sort of hanging around in Bath. And of course Richard Chadwick, who I think, he was still playing in the Smart Pills. He was a drummer for the Smart Pills at that time, who I saw a couple of times. I think I might have seen him with the Amoebics. It might have been a different gig, but of course Richard went on to play drums in Hawkwind, and that's all I've got to say about that. Really, he's a really good bloke, and he was a real he loved hardcore punk as well. But he ended up drumming in Hawkwind as a sort of full-time job, I think. But yeah, I thought I'd put that in there because I used to go for a pint with him sometimes and have a little chat about punk and stuff. But anyway, I'm rabbiting on, aren't I? Let's get to the record. So 1980, let's talk about Levitation. Of course, this record is sort of famous for having Ginger Baker on drums. He's all over this record, I think. Of course, he's an amazing drummer, I think. I'll get to this again later, but there's a couple of records I'm going to show later where I'm not keen on the drumming on those, but this, I mean, obviously the drumming is incredible, and I love this record. It's Levitation, Motorway City, one of those ones that one of those sort of kinds of songs I was talking about, mid-pace, catchy chorus, a bit shorter. Motorway City, what a great song. That song and the title track, and Who's Gonna Win the War, is a sort of another bit of a sort of slightly new wave of British heavy metalish type track. Great artwork, good album, incredible drumming. Levitation, 1980 on Bronze Records. So there's a sort of bit of a Motörhead connection coming back into play there. Bronze Records, Levitation. But next record is the record I was talking about that used to get played in the squat. I'd be on a roof top in the summer, clad in black, hadn't had a bath in 6 months, and this would be blaring out from the morning, all day, all night. I'm talking about Sonic Attack, probably my second favourite Hawkwind record of all time. I love this one. Has the most of those mid-paced catchy anthems on it. I'm talking about Rocky Paths, Angels of Death, and Living on a Knife Edge. Especially Living on a Knife Edge is an amazing song. If you haven't heard Living on a Knife Edge, get yourself to YouTube. Hawkwind, Living on a Knife Edge. I love that song, and I love Hugh Lloyd Langton's guitar playing on this and the next two records I'm going to get to. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Hugh in a minute, but amazing record. Check it out. Sonic Attack, 1981. So yeah, when I was listening to it, it's probably about 4 years too late. I'm pretty sure it's like 1984, 85, 86. I would have been really heavily listening to that record. Okay, we're getting through it, aren't we? So let's get to the sort of latter half of the 80s, 85 to 89. First record I'm going to show is, I think this is one of the best records from the sort of late 80s that they did, and I'm talking about the Chronicles of the Black Sword on Flicknife Records. There you go. Ties in again with the theme of today. I love this record. My copy of it is absolutely fucked. It's partied on, it jumps, it skips all the way through, it's like noisy, but I'll still pull it out every now and again. I played it a couple of nights ago, really enjoyed it. Great record, of course, based on Michael Moorcock's Elric books. I think that's what it's all based on, so if you're into those books, this record sort of ties in nicely with that. And they even did sort of a live Chronicles, which sort of tied in with that. This is on GWR Records. It's a good double live record. It's got a lot of the songs from that album on it, but it's also got like Rocky Paths and Master of the Universe on it, and Magnu. So decent live record from this time period of Hawkwind. Now the last sort of one I'm going to show of the main 8 is Brian from Drop Dead was always sort of saying how good this record was, and I've had it for a while, and I sort of ignored it more in favour of the Chronicles of the Black Sword. But man, this is a great record as well. And there's two things for me that stand out about this one and the Black Sword is Alan Davey, bass player, and Hugh Lloyd Langton's guitar playing. I think for me they're the stars of these two records. Alan Davies bass playing and Hugh Lloyd Langton's amazing sort of psychedelic, more straightforward, really. Hugh, more bluesy, dare I say that, put that word in, more bluesy, straightforward guitarist, but I love him. Rest in peace to him. And yeah, I think for me those two blokes sort of they make this record, the Xenon Codex from 1988 and Chronicles of the Black Sword from 1985. Check them out if you've sort of ignored this era of Hawkwind. Shorter songs, catchier, yeah, it's great stuff. I love it. Alright, so that's the last of the main 8, and there's a few more things I want to show you. So tying in with the Flicknife Records theme, I want to show this Hawkwind, Night of the Hawks, the Earth Ritual preview. Now, this might have slipped under your radar. Now, this is the record where Lemmy came back into Hawkwind for like what? He's only on one song on this record. Are there other recordings with him on from this era? I'm not sure, but he plays on a song called Crew. And it says special guest Lemmy, bass and vocals by kind permission of Bronze Records. So it's a 3-track, 12-inch EP recorded in 1983, and yeah, it's a bit under the radar, sort of Hawkwind record, but definitely worth picking up, and especially of interest to Lemmy had sort of come back into the band for that one song. Great little record. All right, let's get back to Alan Davey. I was talking about him, great bass player, played on those records. And Alan Davey has, or had, did they break up? Not sure. A great band called Gunslinger. And Gunslinger is sort of a perfect mix of Hawkwind, early Motörhead. And this record, I think they've got others. This is the only one I've got. It's called Earthquake in E minor. Slightly dodgy artwork. The production is sort of dodgy as well. But raging record. If you sort of exhausted all your Motörhead and Hawkwind, and you sort of want something that sounds like Hawkwind and Motörhead, made by a sort of a legit bloke, was part of the whole thing, look no further than this record. Trust me, it's amazing. Gunslinger, Earthquake in E minor. I've got one more record I want to show for a couple of reasons. One, it's sort of very Hawkwindish, mixed with new wave of British heavy metal, and also it also happens to be on Flicknife Records. There you go. And I'm talking about Mournblade. This is sort of a mini LP from 85, I think, and it's called Time's Running Out. It's like 80s Hawkwind meets sort of new wave of British heavy metal. Killer record. I feel like this one might be one of those records that people have sort of overlooked or don't know about, and they'll sort of I've been reading about them a little bit, and apparently they've sort of had quite a wild live show. I've never got to see them, but apparently they did play at Stonehenge in 1984 and maybe 1983 as well. I missed that. What was I doing? Stupid. But what can you do? Anyway, great band, great record, Mournblade. Running out on the great Flicknife Records. Well, that's all I've got. I'm not going to go through the whole discography. I've probably got a few other stories I could tell, but I think 23 minutes is more than enough of your time that I've taken up today. But thanks for watching. Once again, thanks to everyone at Negative Insight for asking me to do this. Very happy to do it. Check out the interview. Hope you liked the video. I'll try to do more. I've been lazy, haven't I? So I've got some ideas lined up. I'll get some, I promise you. So until next time, stay healthy and stay clean.